I'm sure you just didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to go run 50, 100, whatever, however many miles, 200 miles. So have you always been a runner? And if not, how'd you get into that?
Yeah, so I'm probably like a lot of your initial listeners where running is not that fun.
Sure.
I was into football, and in college I boxed, so running was just something you did to get in shape for things that were more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did do track in high school, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I actually quit track in high school because it was just not fun.
Was it too boring?
It was just not fun.
Yeah, you played real sports.
It's I was like, yeah. Well, but I realized you needed to run to get in shape to play those real sports.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because when I was in college was when I kind of got the running itch. So I was home, and I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
The Electric City.
The Electric City.
Home of Dunder Mifflin.
Home of Dunder Mifflin. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was actually at Lake Scranton, which in one of the episodes of The Office,
they had a retreat
company
picnic or something there. It's excellent.
It's not like it was on the show. It's a little pond, and then there's like a 3.5 mile loop around the pond. So after work one day, I went to this Lake Scranton. I thought, well, I'm going to try and run around this lake. I don't know why. I just kind of thought, well, that's just a goal.
Because it was there?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's 3.5 miles. I thought that was a big deal. And I right around 3 miles, I got really tired, but I kind of pushed through it. And then, wow, it felt good. And that's what I liked about running, and that's what and probably a lot of your listeners feel the same way, it's the sense of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just you. And the idea of a marathon was something that always, I don't know if it intrigued me. It was just something that I had heard people talk about a marathon. I thought it was a big deal. I never thought that was something I would want to do or could do.
Yeah.
But once I hit 7 miles and then I hit 10.5, I thought, well, yeah, I could probably do this. So it's just opening your mind to the possibility that you can do things.
Sure.
And I think that's the case with anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
We're our own worst enemies. We limit ourselves in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And once we open our mind to the possibility, and I've used this in other talks I've given, I use this term called the maybe seed. Once you plant this seed in your mind that maybe I can do that, and once that maybe seed is planted, and you just can't wake up the next day and do it because you said you can do it. You got to put the time in. But until you mentally believe it, till you think, well, maybe I can do this.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was a marathon, and the maybe seed was planted. And then that was July, and October was the marathon, and I went and did it. And I trained hard. I ran every day, getting ready for it. Well, at the time, it wasn't every day. It was I followed the programs where they said, "Oh,
the Hal Higdon or someone publishes something."
I didn't do the run walk thing like they, but I followed the whole. Don't add more than 3% of your whatever, and I followed all the rules. I got Runner's World. And
I was going to say, this is 96. This is pre-internet, or really where you could just Google it. So you're looking at magazines.
The internet existed.
It may have existed.
It wasn't used for running.
It wasn't used for running programs. It was used for
the dudes liked it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
I remember my friend showed me how to find Playboy online.
Online, you're like, this
that's
is
my first internet experience.
Yeah, right. This is just online. What? Yeah, mind blown. So you did. I mean, let me ask you a question then, because that sounds 4 months. Then you went from running
really nothing
3.5 miles around the lake once to 4 months. Do you think somebody could do that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that's nothing special. Just being smart about it. And I ended up, I think it was my first marathon was a 3:40 and change.
Okay.
So it's,
That's
I'd
good.
say better than average.
Yeah, well, it's like a 8:20 mile pace.
Yeah.
So
anything under 4 is
substantially better than average, I would say. If you you pinged the American population, I would imagine that.
A sub 4 is kind of the goal.
Okay.
The ultimate goal is sub 3.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal in a marathon, and I mean, you're probably able to do that. I've never been able to.
John actually can't run that far. He's really fast, but he can't run.
Short
Just kidding.
distances.
Okay. Short
I haven't
distance
run
like
a sub-3 hour marathon.
anything less than 10 miles, he's blazing. But once you get over 10 miles, he's
Good for
on
him. Good for him. Is sub 4, and what we mean by that is 4 minutes.
4 minute mile in the mile.
In the
Yeah.
mile.
Well, you brought
I
up a
can't touch
point.
that.
He brought up a point when he was on episode 6, the sub 4 minute mindset.
Star Wars episode 6?
Star Wars, yeah, no, that was terrible. This was way better. Dudeology episode 6. He said, running is one of those things that everybody in the world has a frame of reference for running. Because we could sit here, we could talk about lacrosse or football or baseball or basketball, and there's like, you may or may not be intimately have that knowledge, but like running, every single individual in the world can has a frame of reference for running. So you start doing this marathon, and are you like you kind of catch? Is that where you catch the?
Yeah, I caught it.
Yeah,
I caught it. I caught the bug because when I finished, it was like, wow, ultimate accomplishment. And I remember feeling just broken though. Like I had some buddies from college came up and cheered me on and were there at the finish line. And I remember just feeling like I couldn't take another step. And I remember going to the car and just kind of hanging on my buddies. And we drove back. I went to Penn State. We drove back from Scranton. So it was about 2 hours so I got back to school. And I remember the next morning, I was so exhausted, I couldn't even get out of bed. Like, I had to kind of roll myself out of the bed and do a push-up to stand up, like my legs. And any kind of step was like, so I thought, wow, but the feeling of accomplishment outweighed any muscle soreness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was just because I hadn't trained enough to train my muscles for what that pounding was going to be and to hold that pace. Because I had never gone more than 20 miles in my life.
Yeah.
So that extra 10K. And they say a marathon, there's 2 parts to a marathon. The first 20 and the last 10K.
Yeah. Is that true? Did you find that to be true?
For sure. At least the first few you do. That's for sure.
So how many parts there are there then to a 100-mile race? First 20 and the last 80?
So for me, I mean, we're jumping way ahead. Obviously,
sure. Well, then progress us a little bit. Yeah. So you did the marathon. And
I did another marathon. I was doing maybe 2 or 3 a year up until about 4 years. And then that's when I thought, well, I'm not getting much faster. And everything I had done was, right around that 340. I did a couple 330s. But I wasn't getting much faster. I thought, well, maybe I can go further.
Okay.
And at the time, I think the initial jump is to a 50K. I didn't do that. I thought that was too close to a marathon. So I did.
So that's 31 miles, right? Or 30,
something like 5 miles.
Yeah.
About that.
So I ended up doing a 50 miler was my first ultra.
Okay. Now this is, I guess they existed, but I mean this is late 90s, early 2000s.
This was like 2001.
All right.
Like so I did marathons off and on. I mean 2 or 3 a year for about 4 years before I kind of jumped in and figured let me try something further. And the funny thing is, it wasn't until I started running a lot, every day, running a lot, that my marathon times were getting faster. It's probably 10 years into it, I was close to hitting that 3-hour mark. And I was hitting, like, the first half of a marathon, I was right at 128, 127. Sure. And I've never cracked that 3, but I was really close a few times. But it wasn't because I was training at a fast pace and training for a marathon. It was just because marathons were just, I'll go do this race because I need the miles. Mm-hmm. And I was getting faster because mentally I was doing longer stuff. So like in my mind, and again, I'll go back to everything in life. It's mental. And you got to, obviously, again, you need to train, but it's mental. So in my mind, a marathon 26 became not too far. It wasn't that far anymore.
It was just part of the training regimen to go 50 miles.
Yeah. So or 100 at the time, 150 or whatever. But it didn't. And the minute it becomes not long, you can hold a pace longer because you like your mind wants to walk. Your mind wants to not push itself beyond comfortability. And, I know you guys have read David's book, and he's talking about, like, be and he says this a lot, like, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's really, and the people that I meet, that I've met in this group of ultra runners, the common thought is You're gonna get uncomfortable. You're gonna be in pain. Welcome it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you welcome that pain, you almost look forward to that pain. It's not a surprise. It's not something that's going to make you stop. It's like, oh yeah, I knew you were going to come. I knew the pain was coming, and here it is, and I'm just going to push through it. Because you can push through it. And the more you do things, the prolong that pain comes. So a lot of times when again, I'm a little bit removed from competing at the level that I used to compete at, but I remember I wouldn't get that feeling until after a marathon, where typically they say you hit the wall at 17 when you're pushing it. I wouldn't get that feeling until like 30, 40 miles, but you'd still get it. It doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get the pain.
Sure. Yeah. But you guys have a different kind of pain sometimes. I mean, from what I understand and folks I've talked to, it's like you're going to bleed, like physically bleed at some point on your body, right? You're going to have, your feet are going to be just annihilated at the end. And so you use the pain of like, hey, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. That on top of, there's actually like physical, like your body's breaking down to an extent. So
like imagine taking sandpaper, like on a place that you chafe, right? You just chafe your nipple until it bleeds. Like,
I believe the Alter Ego running shirts
they do not chafe.
Yeah. See, so there you go. So Alter Ego, promo code Rich20. Right?
Yeah, I'm going to have to use that promo code to try these shirts out.
And to
I've
go
yet
back
to find a shirt that I don't chafe.
To Ryan's point earlier, too, just for our listeners out there, when he references David, he's talking about David Goggins. We've got his book on the table here, Can't Hurt Me. And Ryan's actually run with him, just to give him a shout out there. But back to injuries, sandpaper, chafing, feet. I mean, you've got to have some. You're wearing some. Are you wearing? What kind of shoes are you wearing in these races?
So I was a Brooks. Well, when I first started running, I used whatever. I thought like everyone else, Nike.
Yeah.
And I
got these at the outlet for $50. They'll work.
I quickly realized Nike's not for everyone. Okay. And I kind of have a wider foot, and Nike's more narrow. And there's a shoe out there for everyone. So if your foot hurts putting itself into a shoe, go to the running store and find a different shoe. What I found was that I'm a neutral runner. I don't have a lot. Although I wear a certain amount on. I guess I'd pronate a little bit, but I don't need the stability shoe that a lot of people just say, oh, you need this stability shoe. Find out what you need and it'll work for you. I found that Brooks shoes work well for me. And then I find that their neutral kind of shoe is what I wear. Now, I did get into the whole Hoka thing and wore Hokas for 4 or 5 years, but I've found that I've just reverted back to Brooks. So that's what I wear. But I wear, they have a shoe called Glycerin, which is like a little more expensive. I kind of find that I wear the Trance, which is their kind of lower end, just because I use them a lot. And I don't like. And
how many pairs do you go? And what, average year when you're training, when you're in the ultra circuit, how many pairs of shoes do you buy?
Yeah, I mean, back when I was training hard, the most mileage I ever had in a year was. I had a goal of I wanted to average 10 miles a day, so I ran 3,650 miles one year. One month I ran 600 miles.
See, that's like the miles that people put on their car, like in a couple months or something.
So I was going through shoes a lot. But there's people out there that run 7,000 miles.
Wow.
Like, that's nuts. Like, they're running more than a marathon a day.
Yeah. So was your jump from 50 to 100? Like tell me about your first. So I guess for folks that don't know, is a technical ultra marathon, is it 100? Is that or anything over 50 or any?
What's considered an ultra is anything over a marathon.
Anything over a marathon.
So a 50 kilometer. Right. If you ran through the chute and ran an extra 10 yards, you're an ultra marathon.
You can put that on your hashtag on your Instagram and claim it. Okay. So what about your first 100 miler then? Because that seems to be like the.
So my first 50 miler I did was the Chicago Lakefront, and it was on pavement. It was right along you go right by Soldier Field, and it's a back and forth. I think we did it 4 times, and that made 50 miles. So I was running on a sidewalk. Most ultra marathons are on trails. Mm-hmm. There are some out there that are on roads, and my first one was on roads, and it's really all I knew, so it made sense to me. And I liked the fact that it was a back and forth because I could kind of regroup, and I could set myself up because the whole thing with a marathon is like you're all out. You have a goal in mind, and you try and say, all right, every mile I'm going to run this pace. And that's how I've always gone about marathons. With an ultramarathon, you try and break it up. So my first ultramarathon, I set a timer on my watch, and I said, I'm going to run 20 minutes, and then I'm going to walk 5. I'm going to run 20, walk 5. Because my thought was, I'll get my heart rate back down. I'll walk a steady pace. So if you can, we talked about 3 hour being the marathon goal. 24 hours is the 100-mile goal. And if you think about that, 24 hours on 100 miles is really just like 4.5. I think it's 5. It's less than 5 miles per hour. You could walk 5 miles an hour. It's a real steady walk. You could easily. It's doable. So if you think about that, well, if you ran and then you broke it up and walked and ran, but if you ran more than you walked, you should do pretty well on a 100-miler. So that was my thought, is I'll just do this 50. And I did fairly well with this 50-miler. And when I finished, they told me, hey, you qualified for Western States.
The Western States, that's a big one.
That's the Boston Marathon.
That's it. Yeah. Now, where do the Western States? That's a very obscure. Anything west of the Mississippi, I would.
It's in the Western States.
Yeah. Okay.
So it starts in Squaw Valley, right near Lake Tahoe, where the Winter Olympics were sometime in the 60s or something. I don't remember. So it starts at the base of a mountain, and you run basically through all these gold mine trails, and you end up in oh golly, I forget the name of the town, but it's outside of Sacramento, Auburn.
Okay. So it's a
point to point.
Point to point. Now, I know my mind. You used to run like you do like either PT test or track test, where like, hey, go run 2 miles, and you do that 8 laps around the track. Or if you told me to go run 2 miles from point A to point B, I'm gonna enjoy the point A to point B, and I think I'm gonna run faster than, oh gosh, I got 6 laps left, or I got 4 laps. To that point, is it this? Do you have a preference on the?
My best performances have been in looped courses, and those kinds of things. I still have the course record on a 12-hour at a school on a track where I ran almost 80 miles.
That's a lot of laps.
Which is pretty good pace.
On a 400-meter track or whatever
it is.
Of laps. That's a
lot. Every 3 hours you change direction.
That's a lot of laps. Well, David talks about in his book, right back to that book, I think one of the first, he had to qualify, and he talks about running and, sitting in this chair and eating salty, not preparing basically well at all. And getting some pretty gnarly, physical ailments throughout that. I have a story that I remember that you told me, and it was so nonchalant. And then I'm going to get into something. It was you were doing one. It was a few years back or something, and I was like, hey man, how'd the race go? You're like, I started pissing blood at 50 miles. So, and I was like, you said it so nonchalant, like that just happens, I was like, so I had to, probably decided I shouldn't finish. And I
did quit.
I was like, you think, dude? You think? I'm like, okay. Well, so what is some of the gnarliest things that happen to you?
Blood.
You piss blood, obviously, right?
That's not supposed to happen.
I'm like, okay, well, I guess,
That's not the same as nipple chafing.
No, and I don't think Alter Ego has anything to prevent that.
So, that sometimes things happen. It's sometimes you feel good, sometimes you don't, and I think that's a life lesson. Some days are good, some days are bad. The more you try at something, you're going to fail at some things, and you just got to keep going.
If you Google Ryan Dexter Punisher, Ultramarathoner, if you one of the things that comes up is a video from McNaughton. 2010, the race up in, is it Pittsfield, Vermont?
Pittsfield, Vermont,
right on the border of upstate New York, I believe, right? So
yeah, it's right near Killington.
The ski area.
That's where they did the big, Ultra Beast Spartan race.
Is that where it is?
Vermont. So that's where Joe DeSena lives up that way.
Yep. So this is at Joe's farm.
Is that where it is? Okay. Now it's a 200-miler.
So is that
doesn't exist anymore.
Is that the death race?
So the death race started after this.
Okay.
So Andy Weinberg was friends with Joe, and they started this death race.
Okay.
And then Joe ended up branching off and starting Spartan. So I was pre that stuff. So this was Joe's farm and his race in Pittsfield. And Andy Weinberg was the race director. And then that became all these other things. So this was pre-Spartan. And actually, I started getting the bug again and started looking at races to do, and I was shocked at how many 200-miler races there are in the country now.
Yeah.
And when I was doing it, this was it.
Well, yours it was kind of like a fringe kind of group. I mean, now I think it's again, like I said, it's gained notoriety. I mean, it's, you know, similar to Iron Man, right? You go back to the 80s.
Right.
Iron Man, you were lucky to maybe see it on Wide World of Sports during a really low sports seat, maybe like before baseball started, but basketball hasn't got, you know, you'd catch like a Saturday and they'd be like, oh, we're Iron Man, and there was like, you know, 10 guys doing it or whatever. They're crazy. But I feel like, what do you think's led to that, I guess, I'm going to say explosion in popularity of these ultra races?
I don't know. I mean, my wife's an Iron Man. She's done 9, 10. So that's kind of why our relationship works, is because we both kind of understand the need to...
Insane about training and stuff?
Well, just, you know, accomplish things.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can see that ultramarathons are becoming more popular. And I think it's just because everyone likes a challenge. Mm-hmm. And you know, you do the marathon, and it's just kind of my story. You do the marathon, you realize you do as well as you can at that, and then you think, well, maybe there's more. Maybe I can go further.